Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the issue of electronic waste management. Now, according to an ASSOCHAM-EY report on e-waste management, India is estimated to have generated 5 billion tons of e-waste in 2021, ranking only behind after China and the United States of America. India is now planning a shift to two standard chargers across mobile phone brands and portable electronic devices. Recently, the Consumer Affairs Ministry held discussions with all the stakeholders on this aspect, and an expert committee will soon be set up to finalize the norms. This shift towards common chargers will not only simplify things for consumers, but also cut down on massive amounts of e-waste generated in the country. Now, many advanced economies are already moving towards standard charging devices. The European Union, for instance, has ordered the USB-C port as standard for all devices by mid-2024, including Apple's iPhone, which at present uses its own standard chargers. So why is a common charger for electronic devices important, and how will it help in tackling the issue of e-waste and the e-waste management as well? For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Urmi Goswami, who's joining us here in the studio, senior journalist. Welcome, Urmi, to Sansad TV studios. We're also joined by Dr. Vibha Dhawan. She's the Director General of TERI, and Mr. Akshay Jain, founder and MD of Namo E-Waste, is also with us. Welcome, both of you as well. Let me begin with you, Urmi. Let's first start by, understanding a bit more about the larger issue. And the larger issue is the management of electronic waste, something which we have discussed and debated for quite some time. It's not just about India. Worldwide, this is a problem. But specifically, coming back to India, how big is a problem is this? Ranking third in 2021 in terms of generating e-waste, that of course is a cause of concern.
Of course, it is a cause of concern. An equally big cause of concern is our inability to manage. But as you mentioned, that's a global problem. Just that in the Indian context, because it is such a big market, it kind of magnifies itself in many different ways. I mean, let me give a small example. Drawing on that statistics that you mentioned of the ASSOCHAM-EY report of 5.2 million tons a year by 2020. In 2020-21, according to the CPCB, the amount of, this is after the extended producer responsibility regulations were put in place, which requires producers and manufacturers to basically reclaim their products, the waste at end of life of electronics, which become waste. So it's after that. Less than 500,000 tons of such products were recovered, were actually recycled as per CPCB numbers. That tells you, look at the gap amount, the amount we produce and the amount that is being actually recycled. Okay. Now, the question is, where does the rest go? The rest, of course, lies in our home drawers in form of chargers or laptops, etc. But also a large amount of it goes into the informal sector, which is where you'll find the informal recovery. Now, you came to the question of how big the problem is. The problem is huge in India for several reasons. One is the amount we produce, which is 5.2 million tons. This is an estimate, so actual numbers might be higher. Two is how we manage them at the end of life, which is only a very small portion of it goes into the formal sector, where there can be proper recovery and proper recycling. A large amount either never gets collected, which in a sense is just lying as waste in your home, but it's waste as in it's lying there. But there is a sizable amount, and that's the biggest chunk that goes into the informal sector, where you will see, informal sort of sweatshops trying to, pry open laptops, mobile phones to recover the metal, to sell it as metal. Okay. And finally is also what happens to the rest of the materials. Again, it's wasted. And it's an unsafe thing, because when you're handling e-waste, it's about metals, it's about chemicals. Indeed. There's a problem. So that's the other problem. And finally, there is a bigger problem that's waiting for us. Actually, e-waste can be a source of materials for us, and we haven't yet woken up to that fact. And if we realize that it's a source, then we'll understand why we need the sector to be formal and better managed but also better endowed in terms of technology.
Okay.
So it's a huge problem. Basically, long and short of it is a big problem.
Okay. Reduce, recover, and recycle. All three aspects need a bit more focus, as you're pointing out. Let me bring in the other two panelists here as well. Dr. Dhawan is with us. Dr. Dhawan, in terms of the challenge posed by electronic waste and the way we're managing it, as Urmi is referring to it, there seems to be a lot which needs to be done.
Yeah, it is absolutely right. And of course, as a country also, we are recognize that as a huge problem. Now, when you talk of the total volumes, and you rightly mentioned the amount of waste which is being generated, and not even 10% of that is getting recycled. Now, where the problem lies? Number one is, how many of us are aware that it can be recycled and we can give it to the places which are assigned for this particular purpose? For most of us, it is kabadiwala, or it is someone else, someone who is the other economically weaker section of the society. So we'll give our old phones to them, we'll give our old laptops to them, and then we don't know whether they are actually using it or they are simply selling it to the informal sector.
Mm-hmm.
In informal sector, it is simply being, in a way, recycled in the crude way, which is the worst possible way, because there are so many hazardous materials which will come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
We have recognized this, that first of all, while we do talk about extended consumers' responsibility, but really speaking, none of us really take that as a responsibility. Companies, they don't take any responsibility. Recently, when I visited Japan, I was told that people are very shy to even change their laptops or phones for the simple reason because they have to pay for the recycling. But in our country, it is something, it's more of a status symbol that I want to change my mobile phone, I want to go to the latest. And many of the mobile companies also, they will have different chargers, and also they won't upgrade your phone after a couple of years. So you are forced to buy what you really don't require.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, the responsibility also has to be loaded on to the companies, that if your equipment is all right, why can't you keep on using it for many years?
Mm-hmm.
Thereafter, it is that we know that in India, it is the informal sector is going to remain very important. Why can't we skill those workers as well? And there are two stages of it. One is the collection, segregation, and so on. So that can be done by the informal sector. Little training in terms of whatever metal extraction or other crude technologies which they can do. But then there are few things which can only be done by the organized sector or larger sector. But then in the same value chain, we want both the players. We have to recognize as a country what we are and look for solutions which are different from the developed part.
Indeed. We will have to look at solutions which address our own specific issues and problems as well. Mr. Akshay Jain is also with us. Mr. Jain, from your perspective, what's the situation on the ground? Because you're into e-waste management. So how does it happen on the ground? And what are the challenges there, as both the other panelists are referring to, various of them, and the way out as well?
We have been encountering these challenges for 8 years now. We started in 2015 as a startup, and we are into recycling of this hazardous electronic waste. So, as the fellow panelists, they've rightly pointed it out that along with the hazards from e-waste recycling, this is also a huge source of metals, precious and semi-precious metals. So there is a huge value that can be extracted from the e-waste, making it a sustainable business model, first of all. Now, I think the government should really be appreciated, because they have done their part by bringing in the best laws which were there in the 140 countries before it came to India, that is extended producer responsibility.
Indeed.
Now, because of the extended producer responsibility, the incentivization of the entire process is done for the formalized recycling. Of course, we have not seen considerable improvement in the numbers because of the rising demand and the lack of infrastructure that we currently have in the country. But if you look at the data, I think in last 5 years, the number of authorized e-waste recyclers have just gone 3x in last 5 years. So definitely there is an emerging sector which sees a huge potential in this formalized e-waste recycling. The third point, that has been raised is that how to include the informal sector in it. Now, let me tell you, before the formalized formal e-waste recycling concept came into India, which is, I think it just picked up from 2013-14 onward. Before that, 100% was managed by the informal sector. So they have played a very, very crucial role in actually, so that is the reason why we don't see the piles of e-waste around us. Otherwise it would have gone the same way as the solid waste. So now we want to incorporate the informal sector in our collection network. So as a e-waste recycler, we have multiple facilities across India. As far as Namo e-waste is concerned, we have three different facilities across 3 different states of India.
Okay.
To feed that, we need that team of people working for us. It cannot be done by the employed people, by our own staff. So for that, we need this informal sector who have that expertise. They can go door to door, and they have been doing that for years, collecting and channel processing of that waste.
Okay.
Now we are paying them for their effort of collection, and we are requesting them not to process this e-waste themselves, because when they do it, that is where the hazard is. But as such, collecting it from your homes and bringing it to an authorized recycler, I think that is the most sustainable model for a country like us, where the consumer would not be so much invested in disposing a device that after end of the life that there could be the consumer mindset is such in our country that nobody would be willing to take it up to a recycling facility.
Okay.
And of course, with the cost involved when you go to formalized recycling.
Okay.
So I think this the whole EPR mechanism includes informal sector in a very very welcoming manner, and they have been included since the beginning of it.
Okay. So a lot being done there, Urmi, and as both Akshay and Dr. Dhawan are also pointing out, you yourself has been keeping a tab in terms of new norms being in place. And the way things have to move around, of course, there are challenges, larger challenges there, but solutions are being found. And one of those, let's talk about one of those recent development, wherein Indian government is now planning to come up with norms to have common chargers for electronic devices, mobile phones, laptops, and other portable electronic devices as well. So how would that, add up to these efforts? How big is this step once, decided upon? And of course, we've started moving ahead on that.
So the decision is actually to move towards two designs. One for the smartphones and other portable and devices and laptops and things, and the other one is for the feature phones, which is still a very big part of our market.
Indeed.
So two designs of chargers. What it will do, it will drastically reduce the amount of e-waste that we generate. Now every time you go to buy a phone, you will have to buy a new charger, because it will come with your phone, because primarily it's a different charger. You can't use your old charger. You rarely can use your old charger.
And in case it is not shipped by the company to you in a box, then you will have to buy a new charger.
Go and buy one. So now what will happen is that you don't have to do that. Either, probably what will happen in due course is that you will have an option of buying a phone with a charger or without a charger. It depends. If you're a first-time phone buyer or something, you might need a charger. Or if you don't have one, so on and so forth. So it clearly reduces. This is critical in the reduced part of it. Aside from the other benefits that you have, that you don't become, once Europe, which is going to move to this norm by mid-2024, and they'll do it, then you suddenly have all the other chargers finding their way into our market. So we'll suddenly be inundated with phones that require those chargers, or devices that require the older chargers, and will again become a haven for e-waste. So that's one. This is in the reduction part of it. It's a critical move.
Okay.
But I want to come back to the, the problem with e-waste, unlike, maybe it's a smaller problem compared to, say, plastics, where already your base amount is very high, and I think the management of even that X amount, like even the reduced amount and the reduced new e-waste and the existing e-waste has to improve drastically.
Okay.
And it's true, both Dr. Dhawan and Akshay were right in saying that the government of India is actually always been with the times, or maybe even ahead of the times. We had an e-waste rules and regulation in 2011 when it was unheard of in Asia. But our biggest problem has always been implementation. And I think there's one critical part of the problem that we need to sort of accept, and that is the informal sector. Now, the informal sector presents both a political problem and an economic problem, because you're talking about a large section of people who are actually at subsistence level or slightly above, or maybe a little bit above that even. And they are a huge bunch of your, people who go to vote. So they're a political problem. Now, how do you create a system that is professional, that is technologically savvy, that still incorporates them? And I think that is what the question should be.
Okay.
We have tended to romanticize the problem a bit always and say, oh, let us include the informal group. Let us include them as they are. I think we need to look at them also as a resource. Okay, these are people who have handled the waste in the past, but they need an upgrade. Akshay mentioned about how they try to impress upon the the informal collectors not to go and give the electronic waste in the informal sector for dismantling. But the fact is that they will make way more money if they go to the informal sector and sell off that amount than they will if they go to a formal recycler.
Okay.
So how do you prevent that? And I think that's where we need to start asking that question, so that the e-waste remains in the formal sector.
Okay. That's a very important aspect there. Akshay, you wanted to say something vis-a-vis the issue of common charges which we're talking about, and how will add to the ongoing efforts when we're talking about the reduced aspect of the overall challenges in electronic waste management. Reducing it is equally important as dealing with the waste which has already been generated or is being generated.
Well, of course, and then there is ROHS, which is reduction on hazardous substances. So if we reduce the use of the hazardous substances during the manufacturing of electronics, so automatically the recycling of electronics will become easier and less hazardous. Now, what I wanted to mention on the common charger point is that it is easier. I'm talking from the recycler's perspective that if we get a uniform material, the problem with electronics is that you get n number of products. Every phone, every product has got different chemistry and different elements coming out of it. So the major challenge that we face as a recycler is to have multiple processes for processing of different things. So if we have uniform electronics, and then you can set up one process particularly with the maximum efficiency. So it's going to be much easier for us to recycle and extract the best value out of it.
Okay.
With having the common devices and common technologies.
Okay. Dr. Dhawan, do you agree, what both Urmi and Akshay are referring to in terms of, having common charges? It adds a lot of value in terms of saving money for the consumers, saving hassle for the consumers also, and looking at it from the recycler's point of view, reduce in terms of electronic waste, and also less effort in terms of management of electronic waste.
I completely agree with both Urmi and Akshay. And really speaking, it should have been done long back. Because to me, it is that those who are producing or the producers, they want to earn more money. And therefore, we are forced to buy new charger every time. And in a way, as we have to throw it once your phone becomes old. So, and it is always like when we talk for energy, we say energy saved is like energy generated. So here it is that you are saving on your e-waste. You are producing less of e-waste that goes without saying. The other thing which actually just now mentioned, and that is regarding that we updated with the technology. There are so many differences. Like we have moved to smartphones, but do we have the technology to take care of the e-waste generated from them, lithium-ion battery? So each one of them is so different that even for those who are trying to take care of the e-waste, they find it very difficult. On the other hand, when we are talking of skilling, and there is so many missions in the country of skilling youth and creating green jobs, this is a golden opportunity. The last point which I would also like to mention is that somewhere the country should be very sensitive towards what are we importing. For it is, we are not buying e-waste, but on the other hand, we are buying the electronics for recycling, refab, and so on.
Okay.
And that should not become a way of the developed world to dump outdated the electronics into India, which then tomorrow will become e-waste. So we should be sensitive towards that as well.
Okay. Indeed, that is a very important aspect. But another issue which you raised, Dr. Dhawan, and I'll put that to both Urmi and Akshay as well, which he mentioned earlier. All of us have been talking about and discussing about various stakeholders. When we look at electronic waste management, be it the formal sector or the informal sector, and upskilling and upgrading the capacity building and infrastructure as well. But a very integral part and very important stakeholder is also the end user. So in terms of user awareness, Akshay, you must have looked at this aspect and must be very crucial in your industry there when we're looking at e-waste management. How do we make users a bit more aware, as well as Dr. Dhawan was referring to it, that perhaps not overindulge in electronic gadgets and use them wisely and dispose of them also in a very wiser manner?
There is always going to be two different schools of people when it comes to that. There are people who carry their own bags to the grocery stores, and there are people who would still ask for a plastic bag. So that really depends person to person. But we have been working with many organizations, citizen action groups, and various RWAs, housing societies, for spreading the awareness about the right disposal of e-waste. So what we have seen is that people, when it is when they are made aware of the hazards, and when they get connected to this cause, I think consumer engagement is important. So we started conducting these awareness and collection drives across NCR housing societies. So initially we weren't getting too much of waste. We were not able to connect with people and engage them in the whole activity. But after multiple events, starting a few were failures, but then after multiple events, now we get really good engagement from the people, and also we get reference. So right now we are working with over 100 societies just in Gurgaon, and the word of mouth it spreads like fire. So there are people are willing to get engaged, because everybody we are Indian people. In our society there is always a thing in our mind that we want to do a good deed. We always would like to contribute towards society and towards sustainable goals. But I think we need to show some kind of a way. So when someone like us goes there on their doorstep with a collection opportunity, so they have to just bring their device down, and also we are also paying them.
Fair enough. Indeed, this idea there, which Akshay is pointing out, or your quick concluding comments on that, in terms of making the end user, the consumer, aware of the options before him or her. For example, in your initial comment, you're referring to how most of us would have a bundle of, cell phones or chargers as well, old, unused ones, still lying at our houses, not knowing what to do with them.
Well, one is, of course, being aware of what you do with stuff that you don't need anymore. But I think there is something else that we need to go to. One missing link in this conversation has been that electronics that we do not consume in the first place, that is, we don't produce in the first place, is actually resources saved. And resources saved is less emissions, less pollution. So it's actually, if we produce less in the first place, that would be great. So how do you ensure we produce less? It's not just by seeing what we do with e-waste, but also creating this thing, which is actually, it's interesting, Akshay spoke of Indian tradition, but in the Indian practice, we always had this concept of getting things repaired. Today, of the last decade or more, repair is a word that's lost. You can take your laptop and you'll have to go off a long distance, say, like at least 20 odd kilometers to get your laptop repaired from a person who you can trust. The right to repair, that is what we should go for. So instead of getting rid of my phone, instead of getting rid of my laptop, if I can repair it, I should have the option. And I think that is what we should focus on. So reduce in a different way, because every item that you do not produce is actually resources saved, the climate saved, and cleaner air and water and so on and so forth.
Indeed. That adds a lot of value there. Thank you so much, Urmi, Akshay, and Dr. Dhawan as well for sharing your views and insight. As our experts were pointing out, clearly there are challenges when we're talking about the electronic waste management, and the solutions are being found for those challenges as well in ways and means which can help all of us. One of them, as our panelists were also referring to, is the use of common charges, norms for which the government is working on. But as end users, as consumers, all of us will also have to be a bit more vigilant, a bit more contributory towards ensuring that we reduce electronic waste and also help in the management of electronic waste around us. We'll come back again with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.